What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and today we are taking a look at Twilight of the Republic previews. The preview season has really started. They were kicking it into high gear last week with a lot of new cards, and I'm going to be doing a weekly review of all the preview cards that we've seen thus far. This week, I'm going to actually give you a little more than just the stuff from the previous week. I'm going to show all the Twilight of the Republic cards that we've seen thus far, including the earlier GenCon previews and stuff, not just the ones that were shown this week. So yeah, if you want to see everything that is, if you want to see everything that's been previewed so far for the third set of Star Wars Unlimited TCG, let's go. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting set. The focus is going to be on the Clone Wars era of from the prequels and the TV shows and so on. And there's going to be a focus on larger armies, which is sort of fitting to the Clone Wars, with both the villainy side and the heroism side of things being able to create token units, either 1/1 battle droids or 2/2 clone troopers, and various abilities that benefit from having more units on the field, like coordinate and exploit. So yeah, let's get into our first preview here. This is going to be Asajj Ventress, Count Dooku's assassin. She was first shown in that weird pack of the convention exclusive, like dark side characters pack, and so she is a 4-cost aggression villainy ground unit. She is unique, and she is a 2/4 with exploit 2. So exploit is one of the new mechanics that helps reward you for having a larger board. When you play a unit with exploit, you can discard up to 2 units, and each one up to 2 friendly units from play, and each one that you defeat from play gives you 2 cost less for the card. So Ventress has a base cost of 4, but if you play her and defeat 2 units with exploit, you can actually play her for free, which is pretty strong. And she has additionally on attack, if you've attacked with another separatist unit this phase, this unit gets +3 power for the phase. Like a lot of exploit cards, I think Ventress is very poor if you play her for her base cost. So 4 for a 2/4 with this on attack ability is very weak, but if you discard even just 1 battle droid and get her for 2 instead, that seems like something pretty scary. And if you discard 2 and play her out for 0, that can be some huge value. So, I think like other exploit cards, she is not great when you aren't using exploit, but she becomes very efficient when you are, at least if you have a nice cheap unit that you can discard for it. Okay, next up, we're going to take a look at Darth Maul, Revenge at Last. So this is the kind of Phantom Menace era Darth Maul, and he is pretty scary. He has a very lore-appropriate ability where he can attack 2 units instead of 1. And I believe that means that if you do that, he does his full damage to each of those units, and they do their full damage back to him. He doesn't have to split his damage between each one, and he is a 5-cost aggression villainy ground unit with the Force and Sith traits, and he is 5/6. So I think this guy could potentially be really scary. Imagine ambushing this guy in and clearing out 2 opposing units in 1 attack. If you can give him Overwhelm, which we'll see some ways to give people Overwhelm later with the Maul leader. But if you can give him Overwhelm, I believe Overwhelm is calculated on both attacks, so you could potentially ambush him in somehow and hit 2 opposing battle droids, defeat both of them, and then do 4 Overwhelm damage with each of those attacks for 8 damage to base, as well as those droids being removed. And I think this ability might be especially handy in a world where we're seeing players have bigger armies because of the focus of this set. So overall, I think this guy is pretty cool. And some very cool art there too, especially with this sort of promotional version from that convention exclusive pack. Okay, next up we have the basic battle droid token. This is it says it's a 0 cost, but this is not a card that you're going to put in your deck normally. It is a token unit, and it is a 1/1 with the separatist droid and trooper traits. This is mostly important because a bunch of other cards generate these, and overall I think that these are very weak on their own, but if you have effects that somehow buff separatists or droids, or if you have effects like exploit where you can sacrifice these, and they're not the most powerful units, so you don't really mind sacrificing them, and then you get a benefit out of it, that seems pretty good. So are they the strongest units? No, but they're probably going to come in substantial numbers, and they can be used for various other effects. All right, and then we have the Clone Trooper. So the Clone Trooper is the Republic token unit. And unlike the 1/1 battle droid, the Clone Trooper is a 2/2. It has the Republic clone and trooper traits, and so that's going to be a little more resilient, a little tougher. And if you've seen the shows and the movies and stuff, the Clone Troopers are more than a match for battle droids. So that is shared in this game as well. A Clone Trooper can attack into a battle droid, defeat it, and remain on the field. And of course, I suspect that just like the shows and so on, it's going to be easier to make a lot of battle droids than it is to make a lot of clone troopers. So while these guys might be the stronger token unit, they're probably also going to end up being outnumbered. All right, we're now going to look at Ahsoka Tano Snips. This is one of our starter set leaders. So Ahsoka on her leader side has Coordinate. This is kind of the Republic mechanic for this set. It's an ability that you gain only while you have 3 or more units, including this one. So her Coordinate ability on her leader side is action exhaust to attack with a unit. It gets +1 power for this attack. And then when you deploy Ahsoka, she deploys on 5 resources as a 3/6, and then she has Coordinate as for a passive this time. This unit gets +2 power. So if you deploy Ahsoka and you have 2 other units, and those 2 other units plus Ahsoka make 3 total, now she's a 5/6. And 5 for a 3/6 isn't great, though we have seen it do fairly well with the new kind of young Han leader from Shadows of the Galaxy. But 5 for a 5/6 is really good, even if 5 for a 3/6 isn't. So, the question is, can you build up that board to make use of Coordinate? And I think if you can, Ahsoka, it provides a lot of value. And I think if you can't, her abilities don't even do anything. It is worth noting that she does have the Force, Jedi, and Republic traits, and I think all of those are going to be quite relevant. Force is an especially strong trait in the past, and I think will be quite relevant in this set as well, with probably some more Force synergies on the way. Okay. Now we're going to look at General Grievous. He's the dark side villainy leader from that same starter set, and he has action exhaust to give a droid unit Sentinel for this phase. Units in its arena can't attack your non-Sentinel units or your base. And I think it's worth noting that there are actually certainly going to be droid units in both the ground and space arenas. And there's droid starfighters and stuff like that. And as a result, this ability can allow you to potentially block the opponent both on the ground and in space, depending on where they're pushing you, if you have droid units there. So that is worth noting. Then Grievous deploys on 6 resources as a 4/8, so a little bit of extra stats compared to the more common 4/7 stat line that we've seen on 6 resource deployment leaders. And Grievous has an on-attack ability. You may give a droid unit +1 power and Sentinel for this phase. So it's similar to his leader side ability, but this time, not only does he give them Sentinel, he also buffs up their attack a bit to make them a little more resilient. And you can either use this with a more powerful droid unit, maybe a droid tank or something, to make a big obstacle for your opponent, or you could potentially just throw one of those little B1 battle droids tokens in their way and make the opponent attack into it with a powerful card. So overall, I think Grievous is going to be interesting. I think that I think it's worth noting that his ability is very lore appropriate, with him, throwing little battle droids and stuff in people's way while he makes his escape. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in game. All right, next up we have the General's Guardian. This is a 4-cost command villainy ground unit. It is a 4/4 separatist droid, and when this unit is attacked, create a battle droid token. This is a starter set card, and as you can see, it has a kind of natural synergy with Grievous, where he uses his ability to give this Sentinel. The opponent has to attack into it, and then you get that battle droid token. If you don't have some way to make the opponent attack into this, though, I think it's pretty bad, because 4 for a 4/4 is below the curve, and it doesn't have any immediate board impact when first played. So normally, 4 for a 4/4, 4 for 8 points of stats isn't great. There are some units that you would play that have that. So maybe the most notable one is K2SO. So K2SO makes up for being a 4-cost 4/4 by having incredibly good abilities. One incredibly good ability plus Overwhelm, which is decent. And otherwise, you'd really be wanting to see more stats. You'd really want to see 9 or more points of stats on a 4-cost unit. And we've seen that with a bunch of cards like, Kanan is a 4/5, Saw is a 5/4, and so on. So this one I don't think is great, but if you enable the synergy and force the opponent to attack it, you could get some big value. Okay, next up we have Captain Rex, lead by example. Rex is a 6-cost 4/4 ground unit with the command heroism aspects. He has the Republic clone and trooper traits, and when played, create 2 clone trooper tokens. So 6 for a 4/4 is really bad, but if you really think about it, Rex is not just 6 for a 4/4, he's 6 for a 4/4 and 2/2/2. So he's really 6 for an 8/8 total stat line, which is looking a lot better. And additionally, the fact that he actually creates 3 units, himself and the 2 others, means that if you play him, you instantly enable any coordinate effects that you have on the board. And even if your opponent immediately removes one of those units, you'll still have coordinate because you will have the Rex, at least one of his tokens, and the unit with coordinate. Now, if the opponent can eliminate your coordinate unit instead, maybe you're not going to get that much value. But I think that even so, a card that allows you to kind of flood the board can be potentially quite strong. And Rex is also going to be a starter set card for the synergy there with Ahsoka. We have the Coruscant Guard here. This is a 2-cost command ground unit. It is a 3/2 and it has ambush. It has coordinate ambush. Gain this keyword while you control 3 or more units, including this one. So I'm not loving the Coruscant Guard, to be honest with you, because when I look at this card, what I immediately think of is Cloud Rider, which is 2 for a 3/1 with unconditional ambush. And I think 2 for a 3/1 with unconventional ambush is just going to be better a lot of the time than 2 for a 3/2 with conditional ambush. Now, one advantage of this card over the Cloud Rider is that if it attacks into something with 0 or 1 power, both of them survive against a 0 power unit, but against a 1 power unit, this guy survives and the Cloud Rider doesn't. But I think that isn't enough to make up for the conditional nature of this ability. Although this is also a card that you feel better about playing on its own, especially if against a deck with ping damage. I don't think it's garbage, but I don't think this is necessarily something that's at a constructed power level. I do think that this will be probably a pretty decent card in limited, and it's possible that we'll see Republic clone or Trooper synergies that are strong enough that things like this end up actually looking pretty good. Okay, now we have Anakin Skywalker Maverick Mentor. He is a 5-cost aggression heroism ground unit. He's also a starter rarity card, so this is another card that you're going to see in that 2-player starter in the Ahsoka Tano deck. He is a 6/6 with the Force Jedi and Republic traits, and he has coordinate on attack, draw a card. So while you control 3 or more units, he can just attack to draw. 12 points of stats at 5 is a very solid stat line, and his ability is at least conditionally good, but I do think he might suffer from being a 5-cost unit with no immediate board impact, which tends to be a problem. If you have a way to like ambush him in, maybe you're playing a deck with the energy conversion lab base, or maybe you're playing timely intervention and you can ambush in with Anakin and draw the card immediately. That seems really good. But as it stands, he feels a little too conditional to me, even though the stats are good. I don't know. We'll have to see. If you could play this guy in limited, I think he would be very strong there. But you can't because he's starter set rarity. So, that's one of those things. All right, Separatist Commando, another starter set card. This is 2 for a 2/2, and while you control another Separatist unit, this unit gains Raid 2. It gets +2 power while attacking. And it is a cunning villainy unit with the Separatist droid and trooper traits. Or, I'm sorry, I said it was 2 for a 2/2. It's 2 for a 2/3, and that actually means a lot. So if this unit were a 2/2, I think that the base stats would be bad enough that it's just not worth it. At 2 for a 2/3, that's still not my favorite stat line, but I think it's a lot more interesting because what you're potentially getting here is 2 for a 4/3 on offense, which is like quite efficient. And are you going to reliably be able to get another Separatist unit into play to attack with this thing at the stronger level before it gets potentially dealt with? I don't know. You're not going to feel great if you play this and your opponent plays a Battlefield Marine because they can just attack into you and clear you, and you don't necessarily have time to play another Separatist unit and then swing with this. But I do think it's at least an interesting card, and it is another starter rarity card. So we're going to see this one in Grievous's deck from the 2-player starter set. Battle Droid Escort, another starter set card. This one's 3 for a 1/1. When played and when defeated, create a Battle Droid token. So this one's cool, and it goes well with Grievous's ability to make this unit into a Sentinel and force your opponent to attack into it, which means they not only potentially waste an attack into a 1/1 unit, but then once they defeat your 1/1 unit, you get another 1/1 unit. So they didn't really make very much progress on the ground. And then also when you first play this, you make another Battle Droid, and if you potentially defeat this to exploit, you replace it with a new Battle Droid. So I think this card is actually going to be pretty solid. We'll have to see, but 3 for a 1/1 is obviously garbage, but it's 3 for 2 1/1s and then another one when it's cleared, which makes it a lot more interesting in my view. And once again, starter set rarity on that card. Next, we're going to look at the Hailfire Tank. This is a common. This is a very basic showcase of what the exploit mechanic can do. So while playing this card, defeat up to 2 units you control. This card costs 2 less for each unit defeated this way. It is an 8-cost 7/6. So paying 8 for a 7/6 is garbage. That's a terrible stat line for that price. But if you get rid of 2 1/1 battle droids, maybe even ones that have already attacked, and you're playing a 4-cost 7/6, that looks pretty different. So I think, like a lot of exploit units, if you have cheap units to sacrifice or units with when defeated effects to sacrifice or whatever, that can make them really a lot better. But the base price is not really going to be worth it. Here we have the 332nd Stalwart. This is a 1-cost heroism ground unit. It's a 1/2, and with coordinate it gets +1/+1. So 1 for a 1/2 is below the curve, but 1 for a 2/3 is above the curve. And the question is just how reliable is it going to be that you enable this? It is also another unit on the field that you can play cheaply. So for instance, you could start on turn 1 by playing 2 of these, and then on turn 2 you play some other unit, and now both of your turn 1 plays are suddenly 2/3s. The problem that I have with this one is that it trades very unfavorably with a lot of opening plays from other decks. So if you play this and your opponent plays almost any opening unit and you don't get the chance to get coordinate before they attack and clear it, I think it's going to trade unfavorably a lot of the time. This is also a starter set unit and, a fitting card to synergize with Ahsoka, but I'm not entirely sure that this is going to be something that people are really loving. I do think there's also some potential for this card with things like U-Wing Reinforcement, though. So let's say you play U-Wing Reinforcement, you bring out this, a 4-cost and a 2-cost, and now the coordinate is already enabled because you just brought out 3 units. And so, yeah, it's interesting. On its own, I don't think it's very good, but if you play this alongside another unit and you're using this to not only increase your unit count to enable coordinate, but then once you get enough units out there, it becomes a much more efficient card for its price. Is that going to be enough to make this card widely played? I'm not sure, and to be honest, I'm skeptical, at least at first, but I could see a world where things like this end up being good, especially if we see strong Republic clone or trooper synergies. General's Blade. This is a 3-cost upgrade. It gives +3/+3. It attaches to a non-vehicle unit, and it is a command upgrade. It gives +3/+3, and if attached unit is a Jedi. Now, note that it doesn't say Force. It says Jedi. So this is not one that you can splash into your Kylo Ren deck and play on Kylo or whatever and get this benefit. If attached unit is a Jedi, it gains on attack. The next unit you play this phase costs 2 less. So you can play this. It's kind of similar to the Fallen Lightsaber or the Jedi Lightsaber. You play this and it gives a buff, and then you can attack and get a nice little effect as well. The Fallen Lightsaber and Jedi Lightsaber have both been pretty good in the right decks, so I have a feeling this might be good as well, though it is worth noting that Jedi constraint is stricter than the Force constraint because there are a bunch of units that are Force but not Jedi, most notably a bunch of villain units, but also I believe like Leader Luke does not have the Jedi trait because it's a time before he's like fully trained and properly equipped and so on. So there are some units that this is not going to necessarily work with, but I think the other 3-cost 3/3 lightsabers have proven good in the right situation, and this one might too. Just watch out for those confiscates and disabling fang fighters and stuff, because upgrade removal can be brutal with these expensive sorts of upgrades. Okay, next up we're looking at Jesse, Hard-Fighting Patriot. He is a 3-cost aggression heroism ground unit. He's a 4/4. And he has raid 1, so that seems really good for 3 cost, but he does have a major downside, which is that when played, an opponent creates 2 battle droid tokens. So Jesse has really high value for his price, but he gives your opponent some value too, and that makes me kind of skeptical of him, to be honest with you, because 3 for a 4/4 with raid 1 is awesome, but giving your opponent 2 battle droid tokens is pretty not awesome. Like, that immediately enables coordinate if they have a coordinate unit on the field, because now they have 3 units. That can be used they can discard that for exploit and bring out some powerful unit. I'm just not sure that this is worth it given the downside, but we'll have to see. If there's some kind of board wipe type effect, so let's say there's something that allows you to deal damage across the opponent's whole board, or maybe you play this and then you're going to play an overwhelming barrage or something, and if there's some kind of effect like that allows you to clear out a lot of small units at once, this guy gets a lot better. But in the absence of anything like that, especially anything like that early, I don't know. I'm skeptical that this downside is not worth the upside, but we'll have to see. Prisoner of War. This is a 4-cost event. It is a cunning event. A friendly unit captures an enemy non-leader, non-vehicle unit. If the enemy unit costs less than the friendly unit, create 2 battle droid tokens. So I think this card could be quite good. And it's also interesting that they're bringing back the capture mechanic, which I think has not overall seen a ton of play in the Shadows of the Galaxy meta so far. I think we've seen a lot of smuggle and some bounty, but capture and rescue hasn't been as commonly seen. However, they're releasing new cards for capture, so let's see whether or not it ends up making a bit of a comeback here. I think capturing a unit can be quite good, and creating 2 battle droid tokens while you do it can be just some nice extra value. It does cost 4, which is a little expensive, but those battle droid tokens are pretty considerable. So I think this could end up being a strong card, and it is worth noting that while you get the upside if you capture something that costs less than you can also just play this to capture a more expensive card without the droid tokens, and that could be fine in the right situation. So overall, I think this could be pretty good. Consolidation of Power, 6 cost, command, villainy event. Choose any number of friendly units. You may play a unit from your hand if its cost is less than or equal to the combined power of the chosen units for free, and then you defeat the chosen units. I don't think this is very good. This is okay. It is possible to use this to bring out some unit, like some really expensive, powerful unit. You can bring it out way early. Like, maybe you play this and then you kill 10 power worth of units and play a Crate Dragon, and you play it really early before you could normally play it. But the problem is it still costs 6, and 6 is a lot. Like, it costs 6 and you have to defeat a bunch of friendly units. I think under normal circumstances, this just isn't worth it. It kind of reminds me of cards like Galactic Ambition, where in theory it allows you to, discount something and bring it out fast and be like a major threat. But then, like, in practice, it itself is too expensive for it to be huge acceleration, and it has too much of an additional downside. In this case, the other units that you have to defeat, and in Galactic Ambition's case, the damage to your base. So I'm not ruling this out. Cards like this have the potential to be really powerful in the right situation where they enable some crazy play, but at least for now, I'm not really seeing there's not like a really obvious crazy play that this enables that I think is going to be super worth it already. So I'm skeptical, but maybe it'll be a build around card and we'll see it having a big impact later. Aura Singh, Crackshot Sniper, 7 cost aggression ground unit. She's a 7/6 with the Underworld and Bounty Hunter traits. She has Overwhelm. When attacking an enemy unit, deal excess damage to the opponent's base. And when an enemy ground unit attacks your base, ready this unit. So this is really like kind of a weird and interesting card. So 7 for a 7/6 with Overwhelm isn't very good on its own. It has no immediate impact when played, but she does win races pretty hard. So if you're in a situation where your opponent has a lot of small units attacking your base, she's just like devastatingly strong against that, because she would get to ready and attack every time, either taking out other units or attacking into the opponent's base for way more damage than their units are probably dealing. I think she'll probably be good in limited. I don't think this is a constructed power level, but if we see a lot of games defined by like racing or like large fields of units and so on, potentially attacking into the base, this card is a potential answer to stuff like that. The problem, though, is it is kind of opponent's choice, because once you play Aura Singh, your opponent knows that she's on the field and they can start choosing to not attack your base, even if they have all those units. I don't know. Maybe it'll be enough of a constraint on them that they will end up. Maybe it would be enough of a constraint on them that they would end up having to change their game plan anyway. But I'm not sure. I think opponents might be able to play around her too often for this to be really good, at least in constructed. But I do think it will likely be a strong card in a draft and sealed. All right, Plo Koon, Koto Ya. 5 cost, Cunning Heroism ground unit, 3/6 ambush, and coordinate raid 3 with the Force Jedi and Republic trait. So when you play this, it can ready and attack an enemy unit, and if you have 3 or more units, including Plo Koon, when he attacks, he gets +3 power. I think this is going to be quite strong. So in limited, at least, I think this is already really good. So we saw the Snowspeeder, which was a 5 cost 3/6 ambush with a very conditional on attack ability. And the Snowspeeder was like quite solid in set 1 draft and sealed play, just for being a ambush unit that could often kill something and remain alive itself. And Plo Koon is that, plus his coordinate raid 3. If you have coordinate set up, he can potentially hit really hard. I think he's going to be very strong, at least in limited, and in constructed play, he might honestly work as well. He has the Force Jedi and Republic traits for some nice synergies, and if you can enable coordinate reliably, he's going to be 5 for essentially a 6/6 ambush is really, really good. So I think in the right situation, if you can if you have a deck that can enable that coordinate with clone trooper tokens or whatever else, I think he's going to be able to hit really hard. And I think in limited, even if you don't have a deck that can bring out all those clone trooper tokens, just 5 for the 3/6 ambush is good enough for that format. Okay, so then Gore, Grievous's pet. This is a really kind of funny and interesting one. So Gore is a 7/7 with Exploit 3, Sentinel, Ambush, and Overwhelm. So Exploit 3 is you can defeat up to 3 friendly units when you play this guy, and each one reduces the cost by 2. Sentinel makes it so the opponent can't attack your other ground units or your base on the ground unless this is defeated. Ambush, you can immediately ready an attack with this, and Overwhelm, extra damage when it attacks goes to the opponent's base. Okay, so, I might sound like a broken record. 12 is a terrible cost for this. This is absolutely not, it's not going to be worth 12. I said absolutely. It might be worth 12 in certain rare situations. Normally it's not worth 12. But Exploit 3, if you defeat 3 battle droids and then play this for 6, this is looking pretty wild. Sentinel, Ambush, and Overwhelm with those stats, I don't know. So I think like some of the other cards that we've been seeing that are that are exploit cards, the question as to whether or not this is good is largely going to be settled on whether or not you can reliably enable exploit with it. So if you can, I think this is going to be very cool, and if you can't, I don't think it's going to look so good. Shock T, Unity Wins Wars, 4-cost command heroism ground unit, 3/4 with the Force Jedi and Republic traits, and she has each friendly token unit gets +1 power, and then on attack create a clone trooper token. So 4 for a 3/4 is bad. That's just like way below the curve. 3 for a 3/4 is actually below the curve now because there's 3-cost 3/5s that you can get fairly easily with the new Shadows of the Republic or Twilight of the Shadows of the Galaxy set. I was getting those mixed up and transposed, but Shadows of the Galaxy brought us a bunch of 3-cost 3/5 units with things like Cassian Andor, Toro Calican, and so 3/4 isn't looking that good at 3, and it's definitely not looking good at 4. But she has the Force Jedi and Republic traits, which are probably going to mean a lot. She has this passive buff to all your friendly tokens. So if you have a bunch of tokens, whether those be clone troopers or battle droids, she's going to buff those up. And on attack, she creates another clone trooper token, which can easily get out of control if your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with her. So if you can play her like protected by a Sentinel or something, or maybe you ambush her in with ECL or Timely Intervention, take out a smaller unit, create a clone trooper, buff your existing units, I can definitely see her getting good value, but it seems to me like you're going to need to combine her with some other sorts of effects for her to really be worth it. If you just like play her at 4 and put her on the field, I think it's a lot of decks aren't going to have too much trouble dealing with that. Okay. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Patient Mentor, our first non-starter set leader to be previewed from this set. As an action, he can exhaust to heal 1 damage from a unit. So that's a relatively low impact action, but it's something that can generate value throughout a game. If there's things that are doing small amounts of damage, you can potentially keep removing that and generate a lot of value if you keep using that, although it is at the cost of tempo because it does, you do have to exhaust to do it and spend your action. So your opponent can do other stuff in the meantime, and they might end up getting the initiative. And then when he deploys, Obi-Wan deploys on 6 resources. Like many other leaders that deploy on 6 resources, he has a 4/7. He has the Force Jedi and Republic traits, which are quite good. He has Sentinel. Units in this arena can't attack your non-Sentinel units or your base, which I think is quite good. And on attack, heal 1 damage from a unit, and if you do, deal 1 damage to a different unit. So now he can combine his healing with some ping damage to remove opponent's cards. I think Obi-Wan is, it's interesting. So I think that the 6-cost 4/7 stat line hasn't necessarily been the best. I think we've seen, so like Luke Skywalker from the Spark of Rebellion 2-player starter has seen at least some play competitively, and overall, though, the 6-cost 4/7 stat line I don't think has been great, but Obi-Wan couples that with, not exactly 6-cost, the 6 deployment leader with a 4/7 stat line that hasn't been like really amazing. Obi-Wan combines that with Sentinel, which is a very strong and high impact keyword though, so he's getting more value than some of the other 4/7 leaders when you first deploy him, and his on attack ability can be quite good, as well as his healing generating a lot of incremental value, plus some good traits. I'm reserving my judgment on this one. I'm not sure. I could see him being like really annoying as a deck that can, like kind of a mid-rangey deck that can just get a lot of value, or maybe a control-oriented deck that tries to, get a lot of value again out of that healing in a long game. So I think he could end up being solid. I'm not like convinced that he will be, but I think I think we could end up seeing something cool here. We'll have to see. Okay, next up, and then in limited, I do think this ability could be quite good because there's a lot more just like unit combat and units crashing into each other in limited. So he'll give you he might well give you some opportunities to heal up your stuff and create that positive value. Okay, so then next we're going to take a look at the Petronaki Arena. So this set has new bases, guys, and I'm really excited about that. So Petronaki Arena is a 26 HP base, and each leader unit you control gets +1 power. That's a passive. So okay, so your options for a cunning base right now are going to be this or Jeddah City, which is a 25 HP base that can debuff an enemy unit for 1 turn, or the simple 30 HP bases, of which there are a few. Petronaki Arena has more HP than Jeddah City by 1, and it has this interesting passive ability that I actually think is going to be quite good in some cases. Jeddah City is not normally considered the best base. Petronaki Arena... So the main things that I see for this as a benefit are if you have a leader that's going to probably get a bunch of attacks in, so especially an early deploying leader. So like let's say you're playing Sabine, like let's say you're playing a cunning Sabine and you have the Petronaki Arena, and let's say that you think that on average you're probably going to get to attack with Sabine, like let's say 2 or 3 times. This base is 2 or 3 damage to your opponent's base, which or to whatever units, which could be good. It's also going to be important for breakpoints though. So breakpoints are situations where hitting a specific value is very important. And one example of that is if you're in a Sabine mirror and you have this base and your opponent has some other base that doesn't buff their Sabine, all of a sudden if you both deploy your Sabines, you can use a heroic sacrifice or fleet lieutenant or something like that to attack with Sabine and buff her by 2 and defeat your opponent's Sabine in 1 hit. Because going from 2 to 3 power is a relevant breakpoint there that enables some of these effects to clear your opponent's Sabine more effectively. And that could be pretty big. And there are other leaders and other scenarios where that could be pretty big. Now, is it worth giving up 4 HP on your base compared to the 30 HP? For an aggro deck, I think it likely will be, though I could be wrong. And in other cases, I'm not entirely sure. If you have a leader that isn't as much about the direct combat and so on, I don't really know. It's going to be interesting to see this one in action. But one place where I think it's going to shine, and some people brought this up in the comments on my YouTube short, I believe, and elsewhere. This base in Twin Suns, where you have 2 leaders, this is going to buff both of them. So that in a Twin Suns scenario, this is going to be some extra value because instead of just buffing 1 leader unit, it's going to be buffing 2. So interesting point there. Overall, I'm actually pretty excited to see how this base does and test with it and so on. I think it could be strong. Okay. Next up, we have Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite. This was previewed by Never Bored Gaming. And this is a 5-cost Vigilance Heroism space unit. Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite with the subtitle, "This is Why I Hate Flying." It is a 4/6 with the Jedi Republic vehicle and fighter traits. When played or on attack, you may deal 1 damage to this unit and 2 damage to another space unit. So this is, I think this is going to be pretty interesting. So as it stands, this is a ship that is very effective at shooting down kind of those smaller fighters. We've seen a fair few like 3/2s and so on. From the new set, cards like Kylo's TIE Silencer or the Mercenary Gunship, and Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite can deal with those very effectively. The fact that it's when played or on attack means that it can, Obi-Wan's a flying ace, man. He can just cruise through a lot of these enemy space units and just keep hitting them, though he does take a bit of damage himself in doing so it isn't totally free. Overall, I think this is an interesting card. I think it could be good, especially if you're worried about a lot of small enemy fighters. But one weakness of this is that doing 2 damage isn't enough to take out a lot of threatening space units. So if we're looking at things like, Green Squadron A-Wing, that's a 3 HP unit. Red 3, that's a 3 HP unit. So some of the units that are even the small fighters that you would quite want to deal with something like this isn't necessarily the most efficient way to handle them. So I'm not entirely sure how strong it's going to end up being, but if the environment ends up having a lot of 2 HP space units and so on, I think this could be very strong in that context because this ability is very repeatable with the when played and on attack. Okay. Next up, hello there. 3 cost vigilance heroism event. Choose a unit that entered play this phase. It gets -4/-4 for this phase. And it is worth noting that with the recent rulebook change about how leader deployment works in terms of entering play, this does work on leaders. So if your opponent deploys Kira, yeah, you can your hello there will just take Kira off the field immediately. Same thing for Iden Versio, kills her through her shield because she just gets -4/-4. And you can use this against Kylo Ren, clear him off the field. And so this is going to be a nice little welcoming committee or whatever for certain leaders, just being able to deal with them very easily, and can also remove units. It's going to be especially good against shielded units because -X effects just go through shields and can potentially defeat them even while they're still shielded. But the main downside that I'm seeing with this card is that the fact they have to enter play this phase means the timing is a little janky. And you might well see situations where it's like, oh, dang, my opponent played that 7th Fleet Defender, but he played it after I played something else, and now I don't have the resources to play Hello There on it this turn, and now next turn I can't clear it because it didn't play this phase. So that is going to be a bit of a downside relative to cards like Make an Opening. Okay, next up, let's take a look at Royal Guard Attaché. 2-cost 2/5 Naboo Trooper, Vigilance Aspect only, ground unit, and when played, deal 2 damage to this unit. This is interesting. I think it's going to work well. I think there's going to be some certain synergies with this that will work well. This was also previewed by Neverboard Gaming, by the way. 2-cost 2/5. Really good stat line. If you had that base, it would be amazingly strong, but you deal 2 damage to it when it's played. So it's really a 2-cost 2/3, which is a sort of average stat line, and not really something that's very exciting. But the strength of this card is going to come from scenarios where you have some advantage related to dealing damage to this unit. So let's say you're playing it in the Obi-Wan deck. Well, you're playing it in the Obi-Wan deck, and that means that you can then exhaust Obi-Wan to heal this unit, and now you have a 2/4, which is above curve. And next turn you can potentially heal it again, and now you're back to actually having that 2/5, which is really good value. Or Director Krennic comes into play damaged. So now you have a 2-cost 3/3. It's basically a Battlefield Marine. That's really good. Someone pointed that out in the comments when I made the YouTube short for this initially. So on its own, it's not very good, but with the right synergies, you can turn the 2 damage that it takes into a potential upside or something that you can mitigate and then take advantage of the really strong base stat line. So I think this is a pretty interesting card. Kashyyyk Defender. 2-cost Vigilance Heroism ground unit, 0/5 grit, +1 power for each damage on it, has the Wookiee trait. When played, heal up to 2 damage from another unit and deal that much damage to this unit. So again, this 2 for a 0/5 is pretty bad, but in practice this is often going to be 2 for a 2/3 because you play it, heal something else, and then damage this, making it a 2/3 thanks to grit, essentially. But this one is a little more situational and conditional to me, and I'm not sure it's going to be so strong. How often do you have units where like healing them is going to be really important? I don't know. And the thing that you get out of it is a 2/3 plus a heal. Like that's definitely better than just playing like a repair or something. But I don't know if it's like better enough to be worth playing a more situational and specialized card, especially because it can't heal bases. It can only heal units. If this could heal bases, I would be much more excited about it. Overall, I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm not thrilled with it immediately, but it is worth knowing the upside's pretty high. So like, let's say that you play this, you heal a friendly unit for 2, you deal 2 damage to this unit, and then there's some other effect that ends up dealing 2 damage to it. Now you have a 4/1, plus you got that healing. In the right circumstance, this guy can shine, I think, but I don't know how often that circumstance is going to come up. And I tend, this might be my bias, but I tend to not be that fond of units that require like very specific game states to be valuable. I prefer more flexible stuff usually. And playing this as a 2-cost 0/5 isn't great. Although I don't know, let's say you have a Chewbacca deck and you play this as a 2-cost 0/5 and give it Sentinel. Now your opponent has to attack into it. They probably can't kill it in one hit, and it enables grit. So, in that deck, it could be quite strong. So overall, we'll have to see. I think it could have some uses. I don't love its like base performance, but if you have a deck that's like set up for it or you have the right situation for it, I think it could be pretty good. Knight of the Republic, 6-cost Vigilance Heroism ground unit, 4/7. When this unit's attacked, create a Clone Trooper token. Force, Jedi, and Republic traits. Don't love it. So the problem with this is that your opponent can just not attack it. 6 for a 4/7 isn't a good stat line. You can get better stats than this at 5 cost. And so you're paying for the Force, Jedi, and Republic traits, which are good traits. So you have good traits, and you have this ability, which is sometimes good, but your opponent gets to choose whether to attack this. And a lot of the time, this isn't threatening enough, I think, and the opponent can just choose not to attack it and focus on your base or whatever. If you play this while you're way ahead and start swinging at the base, the opponent might have a tough choice. But I don't love cards that only work while you're ahead. Now, if you can give this guy Sentinel, let's say you're playing a double blue deck and you play this guy and then you put Protector on him, and now he's a 5/8 and he has Sentinel, and if the opponent attacks into him, you get a Clone Trooper. That's pretty scary. But I think that without some way to force your opponent to attack this guy, I think they can, a lot of the time that you're going to be able to just decline to attack him and focus on other stuff, and his ability won't get much value. He doesn't have immediate board impact, and his stats aren't that good for the cost, so I think he's unfortunately going to be a bit ignorable in some situations. But maybe you play him and then you throw that Jedi lightsaber or General's lightsaber or one of those things onto him and make him a much bigger threat. We'll have to see. Infantry of the 212th, 3-cost Vigilance Ground Unit, 2/4 Coordinate Sentinel. So it has Sentinel while you control 3 or more units, and it has the Republic Clone and Trooper traits. I think this card is really bad. Let me just show you why this card's really bad. In fact, we'll just type it in right here. It is Wingguard. Cloud City Wingguard, 3-cost, 2/4 Vigilance. Those are the same cost, same stats, same aspect. And this card has Unconditional Sentinel. Let's go back. Conditional Sentinel, only when you have Coordinate. Why would I play this one that only has Sentinel in a specific situation when I could play this one, which has Sentinel all the time and has the same stats? And additionally, this card is not very good. Like, people are not rushing to play Cloud City Wingguard. It's like a pretty mediocre card. So this is a worse version of a mediocre card, and I think it's probably not going to see a lot of play. I don't want to be too harsh, so I will say that if there are really strong Republic or Clone synergies, maybe this ends up being worth it. Maybe this and we've seen the there's that Mandalorian what is it, Throne Protector or whatever. It's actually a very similar case. Let me see if we can find that here. Yeah, Protector of the Throne. 3-cost, 2/4 Conditional Sentinel, which is not good on its own, but this card, I think, does have a role in certain builds. So like a Rey deck where you can reliably enable it. If you have other Mandalorian synergies, it might be worth it. Or a Bo-Katan deck where you have other Mandalorian synergies might be worth it. I'm not saying it's great, but it might be worth it in those builds that have the good synergies with it. This guy, could be the same thing. Maybe we see those Republican clone synergies that make it so that this guy is strong. On his own, though, he is a worse Cloud City Wingguard. Cloud City Wingguard already isn't good, so this guy is probably going to be pretty bad unless you have strong Republican clone synergies. Okay. Kraken, Confederate Tactician, 5-cost Command Villainy Ground Unit with 2/5 Separatist and Droid traits. When played, create 2 Battle Droid tokens, and on attack, give each friendly token unit +1/+1 for this phase. So 5 for a 2/5 is really bad, but 5 for a 2/5 and 2 1/1s, that's looking a lot better. So in theory, you're getting 5 for not 7 points of stats, but 11 points of stats, and that's looking a lot better. Then on attack, he's buffing up your other tokens, so you could potentially even ambush this guy. Make your tokens before you resolve the on attack, swing into something, and then now all your Battle Droid tokens are suddenly 2/2s. Is this guy going to be good? I'm not sure. Compared to Shock T, who we showed earlier, who has kind of similar effects but with clones, I think Kraken is the stronger of the two, because relative to Shock T, Kraken makes the tokens immediately instead of relying on getting to attack to do it. And I think that's going to be stronger. Could be wrong, but we'll have to see. I think... And I do think that he's not going to be very good in a situation where you don't have a bunch of token units, but if you do, he can potentially generate pretty big value with that on-attack ability, basically doubling the stats of a Battle Droid. And it works on Clone Troopers too, if you do have Clone Troopers through some other effect. Okay. Separatist Super Tank, previewed by Space Arena Ground Arena. This is, and by the way, guys, I'm going to link to the original preview videos from these various sources in the video description below. My apologies if I forget to mention the original sources of these previews, but in general, when people do content creator previews, they often have like more in-depth thoughts and so on than I'm giving. So I'm going to have these links in the video description below if you want to check out what the original people to do these previews said. I'm not going to link to all the like FFG posts and streams or stuff, just the content creator ones, but yeah, feel free to check those out and get some other takes. They might have better ideas about these cards than I do. You never know. Okay, Separatist Super Tank, 9 cost command heroism command villainy ground unit, 8/8 with the Separatist vehicle and tank traits, and it has exploit 3. When playing this card, defeat up to 3 units you control. This card costs 2 less for each unit defeated this way. Okay, once again, sound like a broken record. Same deal as other exploit cards. 9 for an 8/8 is really bad. If you use exploit 3 and discount it by 6, 3 for an 8/8 is insane. So the question as to whether or not the super tank is good is going to be resolved almost entirely by whether or not you have the ability to play it with exploit. If you can use exploit to play this card cheaply, it's really good. If you can't use exploit to play this card cheaply, it's really bad. Yeah, that's pretty much, and it's a giant block of stats. If you do play it early, it can potentially blow up the opponent's entire board with an overwhelming barrage soon after. I think it can be really scary, but if you don't have those battle droids to sacrifice for it, it's not going to do very well. That's my assessment of this card. Okay. Next up, Echo, Valiant Arc Trooper, 2 cost command heroism ground unit. He's a 2/2 with the Republic cloning trooper traits, and he has coordinate. This unit gains +2/+2. Gain this ability while you control 3 or more units. So 2 for a 2/2, really bad. 2 for a 4/4, really good. The question becomes, are you going to be able to enable coordinate to get Echo into a 4/4, or are you going to have him be a 2/2? If you play him on the first turn, I think he's actually not very good, because if you just play this on the first turn and the opponent has a wide range of ground units, honestly, they can kill him and keep their unit alive. So if you play Echo and your opponent plays Battlefield Marine, doesn't feel great. If you play Echo and your opponent plays Scanning Officer or any other random 2/3 unit, if they play Crafty Smuggler, there's just like a lot of things that attack into Echo, defeat him, and stay alive. And that's a bad spot to be for a turn 1 play. But coordinate for a 4/4, if you can get coordinate enabled pretty reliably, that's really good. So, if you play a U-Wing Reinforcements, and you bring out Echo and you bring out 2 other units at the same time, automatically enable coordinate, and now you have like some pretty good value there. He is going to be a bit vulnerable to the opponent removing the coordinate before they deal with him. So let's say that you have him and 2 other units. He has coordinate, and your opponent plays a card that deals with one of the other units, and now Echo's down to 2/2, and they can trade with him more favorably then. So I do think he's going to suffer a bit from only having good stats when coordinating is enabled, and if your opponent can prevent that from working even briefly, they should be able to defeat him pretty easily. So that's not great, but the upside's pretty good. 2 for a 4/4 is really high value if you can get it reliably enough, and we're going to have to see whether in practice that can be the case. I personally think it probably won't. I'm not like a huge fan of this card, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. All right. Republic Tactical Officer, 2 cost command heroism ground unit. 1/4 Republican clone traits. When played, you may attack with a Republic unit. It gets +2 power for this attack. So this is basically a new version of Fleet Lieutenant and Snowtrooper Lieutenant. Those were both units. In fact, let's just show Snowtrooper Lieutenant here. So Snowtrooper Lieutenant, very similar card in some ways from the Spark of Rebellion set. 2 for a 2/2 with the villainy aspect. Imperial and Trooper traits. When played, you may attack with a unit. If it's an Imperial unit, it gets +2 power for this attack. So now we're going to go back to our Republic Tactical Officer. So the Republic Tactical Officer is 2 for a 1/4, better stats than 2/2. And when played, you may attack with a Republic unit. It gets +2 power for this attack. Now this is more limited. So we go back to the Snowtrooper. It can attack with any unit. And then if it's an Imperial unit, you get the buff. Whereas the Tactical Officer, it has to be a Republic unit. So you don't have the option to use this with a non-Republic unit to just get tempo and not the attack buff, which is unfortunate. But the baseline stats are better. And I think this guy will have an important role in enabling coordinate, because there's 2 big upsides here. The first one is that with 4 HP, he's going to be more difficult for the opponent to remove relative to some other units. And then the other upside is, like, let's say that you have 2 units in play right now, and one of them has Coordinate, but Coordinate isn't enabled. If you play the Republic Tactical Officer, it enables Coordinate, and then when played, you can attack with the other unit and take advantage of that Coordinate before your opponent has a chance to deal with it. So the timing advantage as well as the stats, I think, mean this guy is going to synergize well with Coordinate effects and probably be a pretty strong card. The other lieutenants, the Fleet Lieutenant is very commonly played even now. The Snowtrooper Lieutenant isn't as common because Imperial Synergy generally hasn't been as strong as Rebel Synergy, but I do think that the Republic Tactical Officer is looking like a strong option, and I think he's likely going to see a lot of play, though we'll have to see. Pelta Supply Frigate, 5-cost Command Heroism Space Unit. 3/6 Republic Vehicle and Capital Ship traits. Coordinate. When played, create a Clone Trooper token. 5 for a 3/6 in space isn't exciting. If you play this and also get a Clone Trooper token, it looks a lot better. I think kind of similar to some of the other units. If you have the Coordinate enabled when you play this, you're getting a fair amount of value. If you don't have it, it doesn't look good. I don't like that it doesn't have Sentinel or some other way to like reliably get in the way of your opponent's units in space. It's just kind of there. It has some stats. The stats are decent. They're not amazing. But if you play this and you get some like pretty solid stats in space plus the Clone Trooper on the ground, that's like a lot more value. That's looking a lot better. You know, at that point, you're looking at getting a pretty high amount of stats for the cost. So if you have Coordinate, I think this might be good. If you don't, I think it's looking pretty bad, although I'm not as excited about it as some other cards. Batch Brothers, 3-cost Aggression, a Heroism Ground Unit, 2/1. When played, create a Clone Trooper token. So this is essentially 3 for 2/1's bad, but you're not playing 3 for 2/1. You're playing 3 for 2/1 and a 2/2, which is pretty good. This is especially good against opponents who are using 1-for-1 removal cards. So if you play this and then your opponent plays Open Fire, well, they can kill your 2/2 and you're left with the 2/1 still on the board. Whereas if you play 3 for a 3/4 and the opponent plays Open Fire, they just traded for you exactly. So this card is going to be good against 1-for-1 removal. Good at enabling Coordinate. If you like, let's say turn 1 you play Echo, turn 2 you play Batch Brothers. Now Echo's a 4/4. You just made 2 units. Now you have 3 total units, and Coordinate's enabled. So that is an option. And I do think that this is going to be. I do think that this is likely going to see some play for stuff like that, especially if we have some good early Coordinate cards. I'm not entirely convinced this is going to be great, but I think these sorts of cards where you get two decent units for the price, I think are going to be. I think they're probably going to be effective in a set where there are a bunch of synergies with. I think cards like this that create multiple units are probably going to be effective in a set where there's lots of synergies that reward having a big board. Watch out for bombing runs or whatever though, but that's going to be true for a lot of these things. Low altitude gunship, 6-cost Aggression Heroism Ground Unit. 6/5 Republic Vehicle and Transport traits. It is not a space unit, despite what the art looks like. Low altitude is there for a reason. It has Overwhelm. When attacking an enemy unit, deal excess damage to the opponent's base. And when played, choose an enemy unit, deal 1 damage to it for each friendly Republic unit. I think that's pretty cool. So what you're really looking to do with this is play it and immediately defeat an enemy unit, and then have like a powerful 6/5 Overwhelm is fairly strong. So you develop that as well. If you're not removing an enemy unit when you play this, it's not very worth it, I think, because 6/5 Overwhelm is strong, but it's not worth 6 on its own. In fact, it's not really even worth 5 on its own, so you're really hoping that this when played is going to clear something. It is worth noting that I believe this counts itself, similar to cards like Admiral Akbar. So just playing this, you can do the 1 damage ping. It does go across arenas, so you can use this to, it may be called the low altitude gunship, but you can absolutely use its ability to take out enemy space units as well. Is it going to be really strong? I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think if you have, let's say you have a board with a bunch of clone troopers and stuff, you play this. Clone tokens are Republic units, and you could, like, if you have 2 clone trooper tokens, you can play this and deal 3 damage. That should be enough to take out a fair number of units. And the sky's the limit. If you have a huge board of clones, playing this can do a huge amount of damage. And it is worth noting that this does work on leaders. So this could be the final blow that you need to take out an opponent's leader if you have a huge board. Even defeat the leader in 1 shot. Interesting card overall. R2-D2 full of solutions, super good in my opinion. I just want to get that out of the way. So 2-cost Cunning Heroism, not Command Heroism. Ground Unit 2/4 Republican Droid traits. When played, you may discard a card from your hand. If you do, search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. Put the other cards in the bottom of your deck in a random order. So, okay. 2 for a 2/4 is above the curve stats. You're normally looking at 5 points of stats for a 2-cost unit. This has 6 points of stats. I would probably rather have a 3/3 a lot of the time, but sometimes a 2/4 is actually better. So R2D2 at 2/4, that defeats a 3/2 unit like the Viper Probe Droid or the Gamorrean Retainer or whatever, and it stays on the field. So that's pretty good. And then on top of that, this one plate effect is really strong. So you may discard a card from your hand. You don't have to. And if you do, you can search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. Put the other cards in the bottom of your deck in a random order. So basically, you can get rid of the worst card in your hand and replace it with the best card from the top 3 cards of your deck. That's probably really good. Like on average, that probably quite increases your hand quality. And so not only does this guy have good stats for the cost, he has a ability that I think will be very relevant in a lot of situations. So overall, I'm pretty stoked for R2D2 full of solutions. I think he's going to be quite effective. And I think we're going to see this card. I think we're going to see this card quite widely played. Though I could be wrong, but it is worth noting that this version of R2D2 also has the Republic trait. So the R2D2 from Spark of Rebellion had the Rebel trait. This one has the Republic trait. So not going to work with your Fleet Lieutenants or whatever in a Connie and Sabine deck. But on the other hand, some of those Republic synergy cards, like that low altitude gunship we just saw, they do work with this guy. So, we'll have to see where the Republic synergy ends up. But I think that R2D2 full of solutions is overall really strong, and we'll see quite widespread play. Some people have been critical of the cunning heroism aspect combination in particular, and I think this card is maybe going to get them to change their ways, because it is very, very strong. Next up, Creative Thinking, 2-cost Cunning Heroism event. Exhaust a non-unique unit, create a Clone Trooper token. The art here appears to show a Clone Trooper using a severed head from a battle droid to trick one of those eyeball scanner things. I assume this is a reference to something that happened in the Clone Wars TV show, but exhaust a non-unique unit, create a Clone Trooper token. So this is interesting. It's worth noting. So first off, when I first read this card, I thought it was horrible because I thought you had to exhaust a friendly unit, but you don't. It's exhaust a non-unique unit. You can use it on an opponent's unit. Create a Clone Trooper token. So 2, you're going to get a 2/2 unit and an exhaust. So my immediate comparison with this is Leia Organa Defiant Princess. So let's see if I can actually search for Defiant Princess. Does that work? No. All right, Leia Organa. Yeah, Leia Organa Defiant Princess. 2-cost, 2/2 Rebel and official traits. When played, either ready a resource or exhaust a unit. So in a certain sense, this is doing the same thing. You're getting a 2/2 and you're exhausting a unit. The problem is Creative Thinking says non-unique unit, which is a really big downside in this game. It doesn't even say non-leader. It says non-unique. So you can't exhaust a large number of normal units that happen to be uniques. Like if your opponent's starting play is Inferno 4, you can't exhaust that. Yeah, it also doesn't have Leia's flexibility because you can use Leia to ready a resource instead. So you could play a 1-cost unit, or you could play Leia, ready a resource, and then play a 1-cost unit on the first turn. And Leia also works on uniques. So right now, I think this is basically a worse version of Leia Defiant Princess, and I'm not excited about it. But in a deck with a bunch of Republic or Clone synergies, the fact that you get a Clone Trooper token in particular might be helpful. Or let's say you're playing that Shock T unit that buffs your token units. If there are other effects like that and synergies with Republic or with Clone or with tokens in general, I could see this ending up being a relevant thing to play. But as it stands, it really does kind of seem like Leia, except worse. So I'm not very excited about it in its current form. Which is not to say this effect is bad. Like, this effect is good, but non-unique is a big constraint, and Leia does a similar thing with more flexibility. So I think she's kind of the pick for this slot. We'll have to see. Republic Commando, previewed by the Holocron Card Hub. 3-cost, 2/5, Heroism unit, Republic Clone Trooper, Coordinate Saboteur. Gain this keyword where you control 3 or more units. When this unit attacks, ignore Sentinel and defeat the defender's shields. Not thrilled. So 3 for a 2/5 with Saboteur would be not a unit that I was excited about playing. And this isn't 3 for a 2/5 with Saboteur. It's 3 for a 2/5 with Conditional Saboteur. So it's kind of just worse than that. Like, we're going to just go to the search here. Let's look at some other Saboteur options. Fighters for Freedom is 3 for a 3/4 Saboteur with a relevant ability. And a 3/4 is probably a better stat line for this than 2/5. Rogue Operative, 3 for a 2/4 Saboteur, Unconditional Saboteur plus Raid 2, which is really good. I'm not sure if there's other 3-cost Saboteurs right now. So Republic Commando, I think, compares unfavorably to both the Rogue Operative and the Fighters for Freedom because it has... it doesn't have a lot to recommend it because it is a similar card that is conditional. You have to have Coordinate for it to have Saboteur. And like some of the other ones that I've been talking about before, if you have the Republican clone synergies, maybe this ends up being good. As it stands, I think it's at kind of a low power level compared to cards that we already have in the game. Okay, next up, Maul, Arrival in Darkness. This is a leader. So on his leader side, he has an action to exhaust, attack with a unit. It gains Overwhelm for this attack. When attacking an enemy unit, deal excess damage to the opponent's base. I don't love Overwhelm as a keyword. I think that other keywords are often stronger, but Overwhelm can be quite good in the right situation. So, let's say that you lead off with a Death Star Stormtrooper, and so does your opponent. Well, if you have Maul, you can have your trooper swing into your opponent's trooper, trade, and then also deal 2 damage to the opponent's base. That's pretty sweet. Or, let's say there's just some situation later on in the game. They have an enemy unit that has only 1 HP left, and you're hitting it with a unit that hits for 2 or 3. Using Maul's ability just gets some extra value on the opponent's base for free. So that's not bad. That's not bad at all. I think this is going to generate a fair amount of value throughout a game. It's not the strongest keyword in the world, I don't think, but it's still going to be something. Maul deploys on 6 resources. He is a 6/6 with the Force and Underworld traits. He has Overwhelm, and he gives all your other friendly units Overwhelm as a passive ability. I think that's quite good. So we've seen a lot of leaders that are 6 for a 4/7. Maul is 6 for a 6/6. That is very different. Not only do you have 12 points of stats, but the stat distribution there is probably better than on a 4/7. So I think Maul is pretty scary here. And with all the Overwhelm that he's focused on, I think he's going to be exceptionally good with units that have high power because they're more likely to have wasted damage. And, we could see cards like the Chain Code Collector. That's an ambush unit that's 4/2. Ambushes, units that have high ambush value, I think could be especially strong with his once he's deployed. Now they don't work with his leader side because he has to take an action to have the unit attack, and you can't do that if the unit's in your hand. So he's not like insane with ambush on his leader side like you might otherwise expect. Overall, though, these stats are pretty good. Force traits good. Underworld traits can be good. And I think he's going to be scary. Just this stat line is pretty interesting. First leader we've seen with these stats at a 6 deploy, and I think it's going to be better than the 4/7s that we've seen more commonly at this deployment point. So overall, I think Maul's interesting. Also, hey, if you use that new arena base that we showed earlier on in this video, then Maul comes out as a 7/6, and that is an important breakpoint because that would mean that he can defeat a lot of leaders in one hit. So just something to consider. That new base, there's an example of a relevant breakpoint that it enables. Okay, next up, B1 attack platform. Previewed by Planning Phase Syndicate. Seems like something that's going to synergize with Maul. It's 3 for an aggression villainy unit, ground unit, 5/2. Totally vanilla. No abilities, just a scary amount of power for a 3-cost unit. So 7 points of stats at 3 costs seems fairly standard. There are a fair number of 3/5s now, but at strength 5, this is going to be able to defeat or trade with basically anything that your opponent plays at this point, other than units that have shields. So you really don't want to play this into your opponent's crafty smuggler, who then defeats it and stays alive thanks to the shield. But if the opponent led with, say, R2-D2, you can take out R2, take 1 damage, and stay alive. You can take out those pesky Imperial governors or regional governors or whatever. Overall, I think this is designed to work with Maul and his Overwhelm because it has a lot of excess power. And I think if it will likely be able to get some good trades in a fair number of situations, but you do have to really watch out for cards like Daring Raid or Make an Opening because the low HP on this card does hurt. It'll be interesting to see where it ends up overall. Also, if you play this and your opponent's in space or otherwise just doesn't have anything to deal with it or whatever, this is like really scary because you can hit them for 5 every turn starting pretty early. That can be pretty nasty. Savage Oppress. This is Darth Maul's brother, I believe. 7 cost aggression Villainy ground unit. Savage Oppress Monster is his subtitle. 7/7 Force Knight Underworld, first unit with the Knight trait, I believe. When played, if you control fewer units, including this one, than an opponent, ready this unit. This guy's very scary. So we look at stuff like Fet's Fire Spray, where it comes into play ready and swings for 5. This guy comes into play ready and swings for 7 if you have fewer units, including this one, than an opponent. So I think this is like, for a more aggro oriented deck, this card could be like the closer. This could be like, you know, this is the card that I bring, like my opponent stabilized the board. They're in a relatively good spot. They have more units on the field than me, but their base is low. I bring in Savage and swing for 7. That could be game over. And I think he fittingly works well with Maul, because Maul has that ability to give a unit overwhelm. So let's say that you play Savage Oppress, ready him up, he's 7/7, your opponent throws out a small sentinel in his way. Well, you can use Maul, swing with overwhelm, and push damage through that sentinel straight to the base. So I think this guy is pretty scary. I think there's a good chance that we're going to see him as a closer card for villain aggro decks. And also, he doesn't have to go for the base. You can play this guy in a more mid-rangey or even control type style and, play him out, ready him up, and start taking trades with your opponent's units. At 7/7, he has a strong ability to fight. He can defeat a bunch of leaders in one hit and remain alive. He can defeat a bunch of units in one hit and remain alive. Overall, I think he's very threatening and works especially well with Maul for the overwhelm. Unnatural Life 3-cost Cunning Villainy event. This was previewed by Thork's Hot Takes over on YouTube. Play a unit that was defeated this phase from your discard pile. It costs 2 less and enters play ready. At the start of the regroup phase, defeat it. So this is very similar to the card Sneak Attack. Let's take a look at Sneak Attack here. So the difference is, if we look at Sneak Attack costs 2 and discounts the card by 3. So Sneak Attack, you're actually paying 1 less for the card. Now we look at, in Unnatural Life, that's reversed. It costs 3 and discounts the card by 2. So instead of paying 1 less for the card, you're actually paying 1 more for the card in total. And then at the start of the regroup phase, defeat it. Same thing, Sneak Attack. Same thing. Start of the regroup phase, defeat it. The big difference between these two cards, aside from Unnatural Life having the villainy aspect, is that Unnatural Life plays from the discard pile instead of from your hand. And that makes it a lot more usable, and that makes it make sense as to why this is less efficient on resources, because it's more efficient on cards. You're bringing back something from discard instead of from hand, and that means that you're not incurring a card disadvantage by making one of your cards only have a temporary effect. I think this is going to be really good with the Ruthless Raider in particular. Ruthless Raider being a unit that has a strong when played and when defeated effect. But I could see this being a pretty good card overall for more aggro-oriented villain decks, and it will work especially well with cards that have good when defeated abilities. It is worth noting this does not work with Super Laser Technician, even though Super Laser Technician is a card with a good, when defeated ability. I'll show you why. Super Laser Technician, when defeated, you may put this unit into play as a resource and ready it. And because it's in your resource zone, it is not in your discard pile, and therefore Unnatural Life does not work with it. So that's just something to consider. I said it works well with things with a good when defeated abilities, and then I was like, wait a minute, I do have to qualify that, because Super Laser Technician is one of the best when defeated abilities, but it notably doesn't work here. Okay, next up, Ki Adi Mundi, Composed and Confident. This is a 5-cost 5/7 with the Force Jedi and Republic traits. Vigilance aspect, not heroism, so you could use him in a villainy deck if you wanted. Coordinate, when an opponent plays their second card each phase, you may draw 2 cards. So you have to have those 3 units in play, including him, in order to get this ability active. But I think it's really threatening. Drawing 2 cards could be really good. And furthermore, if you enable Coordinate after your opponent has played their first card, they play their second card and you draw 2 cards. Even if their card would remove your Coordinate, I believe that this ability goes off first. So could be wrong on that. Feel free to correct me if I don't understand the timing structure, but I believe, let's say you have 3 units and your opponent plays an Open Fire as their second card and kills one of these units. I think this goes off first and you still get your draw. So this is potentially a huge amount of card advantage. It also has good stats for cost. So that's 12 points of stats at 5, which is, quite good, arguably above the curve. It seems like 11 or 12 points of stats is on curve at 5. He also has good traits, Force Jedi and Republic, overall very relevant. I think this guy could be quite strong. The Invasion of Christophsis. This is a crazy card. So 15 cost event, Vigilance. Exploit 4. So you can discard up to 4 units, or you can defeat up to 4 of your units when you play this, and each one discounts it by 2. Choose an opponent, defeat each unit that player controls. So this is a one-sided board wipe, which is crazy. But it costs 15, which is also crazy in a bad way. How many games are getting to 15 resources? Not so many. So at 15, it's pretty crazy, but are you going to get there? I don't think so. I think what's going to be more commonly the case for this card is that you're going to use exploit, discard some of your defeat some of your units, but hopefully not all of them, and then get the one-sided wipe on your opponent's valuable units. So, dream scenario, you defeat four battle droids, discount it by 8, play this card for 7. All of a sudden, your good non-battle droid units are still on the field. Your opponent's board is wiped completely, and you have a huge advantage. How often is that going to happen? I don't know. So this card was previewed by Dragon Rider TCCG. I don't know why there's 2 C's there. Might be a typo. Might just be a name that I am not immediately recognizing. And I think it's going to be one to watch. I'm not saying it's going to be great for sure, but if you can enable the exploit and hit them with a one-sided wipe while still having other good units, it's going to be pretty good. But if your opponent's keeping your board small, it's just going to be too expensive. I think it's going to be hard to play it. So it's kind of an interesting card. Of course, if you go all the way up to 15 resources, knock yourself out. Just blow up their field for no losses of your own. But I think it's going to be more common to see this with the exploit. Manufactured Soldiers. This is a 3-cost double command event. Choose 1, create 2 clone trooper tokens, so 2 2/2s, or create 3 battle droid tokens, so 3 1/1s. The clone troopers are more value just in terms of stats, but the battle droids develop more units, which means that you have potentially more guys for exploit, and you potentially have more ability to enable coordinate. So I think this is an interesting one. It is worth noting, you could conceivably be playing a clone trooper deck and decide to use this to make battle droids instead, in order to enable your coordinate more reliably. So it does have a little bit of flexibility also, though I think it's going to be probably more common to see people using this for whichever side of it they have synergies for. So if you have droid synergies, battle droids. If you have clone synergies, clone troopers. And 3 for 2 or 3 units seems like it could be pretty good in the right situation. It is, of course, a double command card, but I think relative to some of the double command cards we've seen, this one's looking pretty strong. Confederate Tri-Fighter, 3-cost aggression, villainy space unit, 3/3 separatist droid vehicle and fighter traits. This is an example of a droid in space. I was discussing that earlier when we were talking about Grievous. Bases can't be healed. This was previewed by Artificery. And so this is an interesting card. Removing healing from bases is, in my opinion, a pretty strong effect in the right situation. The problem I have with this is that if the opponent kills this unit, the effect turns off. So this doesn't actually block Vigilance. So Vigilance is one of the highest impact heals. And typically what you see with this is a control player playing against aggro will choose to heal 5 damage from base and defeat a unit with 3 or less remaining HP. Now you might think, well, this blocks that. Heal 5 damage from base and defeat a unit that costs 3 or less. Even if they kill it, it's still blocked. The problem is Vigilance says choose 2 in any order. So they can choose to do defeat a unit with 3 or less remaining HP first. And now your Tri-Fighter's off the field, bases can't be healed, no longer in effect, then they heal their base. RIP. So this doesn't counter Vigilance, which is maybe the best healing card. But Make an Opening does counter that, unless the Make an Opening kills this immediately, which would require them to have already debuffed or damaged it. It counters some Restore units and so on. The main issue I see with this is that 3 for a 3/3 is kind of a bad stat line, and the opponent might just be able to deal with it and then heal anyway afterwards. If we compare this to Wolf, who is the other... So Wolf is the current anti-heal card of choice. He is a 2-cost 3/2 aggression ground unit with Saboteur, and when played or on attack, bases can't be healed for this phase. Now you might think, well, this only works for the phase. This is worse. The other one's a constant. The thing about Wolf is, if I play Wolf and the opponent immediately kills him, his ability is still in effect for the turn. So Wolf does block Vigilance if you have played him or attacked with him on that turn, and that is not the case for the Confederate Tri-Fighter. So I think the Confederate Tri-Fighter, ultimately when I look at it, it seems worse than Wolf at blocking healing, and because Wolf is not aligned, he's just only aggression, I'm not sure when I would want to run this instead of Wolf. The main upside I would see to it would be in a deck with a lot of droid synergies or separatist synergies or whatever. Maybe that would be good enough to enable the Tri-Fighter to be better, but as it stands, I think Wolf plays a similar role more effectively against the cards that we typically see. Could be wrong. That's just my take. But yeah. Last but not least, this is a card that was shown at a trade show in Poland, I believe, and doesn't have a normal preview. But Aid from the Innocent, 5-cost Cunning Heroism event. Search the top 10 cards of your deck for 2 Heroism non-unit cards and discard them. Put the other cards in the bottom of your deck in a random order. For this phase, you may play the discarded cards, and they each cost 2 less. This is really weird. But I think in the right situation, it can be good. So what you're looking for is so it's non-unit. So you're looking at events and upgrades right now. Search the top 10 cards of your deck for 2, and they do have to be heroes. But the dream for this is, okay, I search the top 10. I find 2 of these. They're both things that I want to play. They both get discounted by 2. So I paid 5, and then I discounted 4. So I really only paid 1 on net in order to get to play 2 cards from the top of the deck. That's a lot of card advantage. The problem I see with this is that often non-unit cards are situational. So let's say I see an event, let's say one of the events is Spare the Target. That Spare the Target's a good event. But does the opponent have a card that I want to use it on? Maybe not. So I think sometimes you're going to play this and you won't have great targets, or you'll be able to play the cards but not to the maximum efficiency. And that might be enough of a downside to make this not worth the big card advantage. But in the right situation, this is really a lot of advantage. So I don't know. I'm uncertain about this one. It is also worth noting that most decks are mostly units. So there is a chance of like actually missing with this and not seeing 2 heroism non-units or not seeing 2 heroism non-units that are applicable. So I don't know where this one's going to end up. I think the upside is very high, but I don't know if it's reliably going to be able to get there. And I think sometimes it's going to be a little derpy. We'll have to see. But I believe that's going to do it, guys. That is the last of these cards until Fantasy Flight previews, a ton more cards in the coming week. But that was the Twilight of the Republic spoilers so far. If you've stuck around for this, thanks so much for watching. I know this was a long one, but the future weekly preview reviews are going to be shorter than this one because I'm just going to discuss the cards that were shown that week and not the whole thing. But I thought for the start, we may as well show everything that we've seen thus far for the set to get people the broader perspective. So thanks again for watching, guys. We'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content, and I will catch you guys later.